Hey guys, how you doing? I'm going to play a little bit of music from my guest today, Lara Solnicki.
This life today will lengthen into evening. We'll say goodbye to what we've ever had. Alone where we had together. I'll remember April and be glad. I'll be content you loved me once in April. Your lips were warm, love and spring were new. I'm not afraid of autumn and her sorrow, for I'll remember April and you. The fire will dwindle into glowing ashes, for flames and love live just a little while. I won't forget and I won't be lonely. I'll remember April and I smile. The fire will dwindle into glowing ashes. Flames and love live just a little while. I won't forget and I won't be lonely. I'll remember April and I'll smile. I'll smile.
And and that is my guest, Lara Solnicki. Hi, Lara.
Hi, Cathy. How are you?
Very good. How's it going? Everything good today?
Yeah, it's a great day in Toronto. Um, you don't have the same this as you do in Southern California, so
I know we are, and we're finally out. I mean, to you guys, it's not a winter, but uh,
yeah.
it is. It is a long winter here, actually.
Oh,
So
no kidding.
yeah, it's been cold. Much. This is a very unusual year, but anyway, you know, you know, it is what
Yeah,
it
it
is.
is what it is. I mean, I guess we're all kind of trying to, certainly in Toronto, I feel that since the pandemic, it's hard to find familiar ground in this business, like everything feels different, including the weather. Like new reality. Right. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
new
I've been
reality
really
is that's
interested.
it.
I've been really interested in trying to get sort of like a sense of the difference these days between the US and Canada, since the pandemic. And of course, I have a lot of friends in New York still and everything, but just to, you know, it's, it feels a little, it still feels like we're charting unknown territory as far as the industry goes, and everything that felt like the flow of life before the pandemic feels different over here. Like I'm, I mean, I have this sense of, America tends to be, the personalities are different. People are very proactive, and, certainly New York, of course, people are very determined to have, the jazz economy do as best it can and things to bounce back. But, the Canadian thing is, it's a little different here. Like the culture's pretty different. And I don't know if you know this, but like I was living in New York up until the pandemic on an artist visa, an O1 visa. You're probably familiar with it. It's an international artist visa, but then it actually expired during the pandemic. So so it's just like I've been trying to sort of have a sense of um like how to sort of like basically chart forward with the changes and everything. And I am very interested to know how things are different in the US in general,
Well,
you
that's
know?
yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Although um, I'm sure there are people who are more familiar with Canada than I am. I'm vaguely familiar, I would say. And
Yeah.
Toronto has always given me a feeling of creative license,
Oh.
and people, and a little bit like Europe, when you're an artist, this is what I've always felt about Toronto.
Hmm.
As in Europe, I feel like if you're an artist, you have an easier time finding work, getting funded, getting recognized by awards, things like that. In the States, I don't think it's that easy. I
Yeah.
think people have to be proactive,
Right.
and even more so in LA. New York, I always used to describe it. New York is this big wheel turning, and the
Yeah.
challenge is to jump on. But
Right.
LA, there's no wheel. So the challenge is to build it. And that's what I've
Mhm.
always done personally here. I've always created stuff. So that part of it for me is true. And then the pandemic, um, yeah, the pandemic was, so uh, totally
Yeah.
affected in our total lives.
Yeah.
And of course, work was affected, but people came, I mean, at least in LA, people came back. You know, they started creating different venues. You know, of
Oh,
course,
no
venues
way.
closed, and yeah, but they started because they were dying to create. You know,
Yeah.
and so, um, and then the music business. I mean, that's kind of this whole huge subject by itself, and
Yeah.
I mean, but I personally kind of group it in with life, you know,
Yeah.
AI and, you
Hmm.
know, politics and everything's changing so dramatically.
Yeah.
Personally, what I keep working on spiritual awareness and growth because I don't think I could exist otherwise. I would be
Yeah.
so down about changes, you know. It doesn't seem like
Hmm.
there's a lot that doesn't seem like it's actually improving. However, I did speak to an assistant principal yesterday. We had a long conversation. She said she sees total joy and inspiration for life in the young people.
Hmm.
And I loved hearing that. You know, uh,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought, boy, if I was a young person, I might feel a little weird about the future. No, she said they're very inspired.
Hmm.
So I grasp at all those kind of things personally. So
Maybe
yeah.
there's,
So
yeah,
what are
being
you?
educated. Sorry?
Um, what kind of jobs or what kind of music um career stuff are you working on presently?
Well, I launched my last album, The One and the Other, in, I guess, January 2021. So, it it feels like it hasn't been that long ago, although it has, right? It's just that because of the pandemic, certainly what I'm like in Toronto, we had so many lockdowns around that time that it feels like everything just took so long, and it was very hard to figure out even when to launch it. I was supposed to launch it in July 2020. So I've actually been working on a very kind of challenging, long, dramatic piece since 2019 that is grant funded, although it's it's a poetry based project, so it's even more so than the last album. And it's again, I'm working with Jonathan Goldsmith, the same producer who works a lot in film. So we're doing this, it's a dramatic poem told in four, I call them tableaus, but I'm using dramatic imagery instead of like basically a visual presentation of a strange contemporary narrative, right?
Yes.
So in a way, I guess you could say it would be a bit like an oratorio in that it will be recited. I'm gonna, to do it live, we have again the electronics in the background with the live elements that are built on top of that that are gonna come in. So it's being recorded like a film score as
Uh-huh.
well with the layers. And then to do it live, it would be a bit more complicated, a bit involved, but there would be, the electronics and then the live musicians and then myself who's reciting the poem that would be about 60 minutes for the whole thing, ideally once it's completely done. So it's like an album, basically. And or a one act, like a one set performance, right? And then and then there is some singing involved too, but it's built around the story. So I've been doing this for a while. It takes a really long time just to write the poetry, but I am finally starting to do now incrementally the recording stuff and fleshing it out. So we finally did go in and do a rough-in for the beginning of Tableau 2, which is for now, just sort of the demo format to try to get more grant money through
Yeah.
the Canadian system, as we've discussed. Although I have already gotten grant money everywhere, basically, except for Factor. Um, and then try to go kind of, I'm not going to say go backwards, but I didn't think it would be a good idea to jump in with tableau one because it's so like starting and ending the thing is a big thing, right? So just starting at the beginning of the second tableau, and then from there I'll kind of go a bit backwards, but it's exciting. I mean, this piece is going to have some things in common with my last album. It doesn't have that much in common with my first two albums. And then, the way I see it is, like some people from my jazz fan base will be into this. Some people are from the poetry environment, and people that are into multimedia art will be interested, and because it's different. So, of course, I'm still wanting to do like pure music and stuff like that, which I love as well. But this piece has been hanging over me for a while. I want to, it's so hard to do it. It's, on top of promoting it, I mean, that's a whole other animal.
Yeah,
But
that's a whole other animal.
yeah, but I just,
Are you actually singing on it?
yeah, but the singing is happening like in a cinematic situation. So it's like the poetry is the story, like
Yeah,
the characters,
yeah.
you would say, although there are characters, it's like a dreamscape. It's this like a circuitous narrative. Like it starts at the end and then it ends at the sort of the beginning, and like one of those kind of situations. And then the singing is happening like free improvisation or guided improvisation from the poetry, which I did in my second album, or sorry, my third album, The One and the Other. And then there will be some I'm bringing in a couple of tunes, almost like theme songs in a movie that I'm going to involve in different ways, and I'm going to release those as singles as well.
Yeah. Sounds like an amazing project.
It's a weird project, and it's based on my research into abnormal psychology too. So the characters are fucked up.
That's funny.
Dark. It's like a psychological thriller told through contemporary poetry. So it's out there.
Sounds cool. And I mean, it sounds like a good story. It sounds like a good movie, actually.
Well, I think the thing is that, I've talked about this in some other interviews too. Like my father was a film producer, and he actually produced a bunch of David Cronenberg movies.
Aha!
I guess, that's the whole thing. I feel like when I started working on my writing in music, it just started taking on like all the things that I was like environmental things, or like the classical music degree. So I was into like Debussy and Ravel and, like French poetry or German poetry. And then already that was kind of like, okay, well, that's a bit of a detour from, the modern jazz thing. But then I started, just because it's so much work. Like it's so much work, even just applying for grants. You have to like, it's a bit, how can I say this? It feels like not productive when you apply for grants, you have to talk about the whole project. It's not even done yet. How do you know? And like, you don't want to, the creative process, if you know what it's going to be like, what's the joy of discovery, right? But somehow you have to, in a way it's good because you have to sort of formulate even like a budget and the sense of how long and all of this stuff you actually don't know really, but then you have to kind of have some kind of a vision for it at the end. But then you also have to be in a position where you trust that the juries know because they do this themselves, it's going to change a lot from your application.
Yeah.
It's just how it is, right? So there's kind of artistic license, but sometimes things really can change a lot, and then you have to sometimes like ask them for permission. So it's fun, I guess I'm just, like just kind of doing what I do. And I mean, I used to do a lot of straight ahead gigs in Toronto. Like I had house gigs and stuff, and you were just playing I Remember April. I mean, I used to love doing all this stuff, and I still love doing standards, and I love improvising, and I love ear training and all that stuff. I just don't see that the gigs are there anymore right now, you know, like this. And when I was living in New York too, I realized that people were mostly telling me to promote my own music because, you know, you get like different opinions. Some people say, well, do something familiar or do another, you know, because you can have a built-in audience. But then a lot of other musicians, they're not that interested in people doing standard anyway, because but so it's really hard to please other people and to sort of predict the market. I wish, honestly, I thought about, you know, just wandering around like I used to do, like peddling a straight ahead gig. That would be awesome in Toronto, even, you know, like a restaurant that figured they could
Yeah,
really use a boost on a Thursday or a
yeah,
Sunday or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
I just don't know that I used to be like really good at doing that. Like I would pound the pavement and I'd hit these gigs for, you know, but I don't
You
know that
know,
we do there anymore, even in
I
this New
know. I know,
York,
me
right?
too, actually. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm 70. I've been singing professionally since I was 12. And
You.
so I mean, I did all that, and I always think about I really should just go out. I know how to do it. I used to do it all the time. Go out to wherever and say and sell them even on a duo. You know, just me and a
Yeah.
piano player. Entertain your people. And I've thought about the standard route, and I've thought about the non-standard route because
Mhm.
there are places that you could do that too, but
Yeah.
um, it doesn't. It probably. I would probably say not that I'm so busy, but I am busy, but that's not it really. I think it's that my desires are not truly there. My desires are doing more artistic things, songs, projects that like I just this weekend I did a gig with a no net. And my friend on bass, he is brilliant and he arranged the songs great. And they included, I wrote lyrics for a bunch of them. There were Schofield tunes and Monk tunes, um,
Wow.
Vince Mendoza's song, Pat Metheny, an original, a few standards, but everything was, it's a no net. It was really interesting. The arrangements were beautiful, spacious,
Yeah.
dynamics, good instruments, and uh, I really like doing that. Other than that, I love singing with a small group and being very singing songs, but being very spontaneous and free,
Yes.
leaving a lot of space. Something happens,
Yeah.
go with it. I love that too. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, and who doesn't love a good standard, especially singers. But
Totally.
um, yeah, it's interesting how you move through your art. I think what you're doing now is, I mean, to me that sounds like a brilliantly interesting and fun project, to work on. I mean,
It's
very
really
worthwhile.
challenging. Yeah. It's really challenging. I mean, I have to get it finished, right? Because it's like the luxury of taking all this time in a way. It's just like I have to
Yeah.
get something done. Um, and then I guess I'm going to try to promote it with sort of these kind of new music, uh, concert sort of like that they already have their seasons. So I sort of book it into because it has to be in the right venue. I mean, I'm kind of hoping that I can create some kind of a visual thing in the background that's simple as well. Like I have some ideas from because it's about two filmmakers actually. So I have some ideas about like these kind of filmic things in the background and these kind of that is not too distracting because there's so much going on already in the poetry and the music. But so I would try to promote it at something like that. I mean, it would be great to see if I could do sort of like I guess a mini tour, do like Toronto, Montreal, maybe Ottawa and New York. That's a pretty reasonable, not too expensive traveling loop, like it's only an hour and 15 minutes or so to fly from Toronto to New York City. And then Montreal is, I guess, like a 5.5, 6 hour drive or a short flight. But the rest of Canada is such a big country that I haven't really tried to do anything to try to like, because the big cities, you'd have to go like halfway across the country just to get to another place with like a substantial audience or a jazz festival or something, and then go all the way to the West Coast. And then if you're in the West Coast, you're much better off just doing a tour of the West Coast that includes the United States, where you have larger audiences, more of a jazz and creative music audience. And then the cities are much closer together, and it's a lot. I did a tour of California, as you know, and I found that even like California, with the insanity of everything being so stretched out, it still makes more sense than a Canadian tour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My friend Roland is saying you should talk to Josh Nelson for your ideas as background content in the live performance of your project. I don't know if you know Josh Nelson. He's a pianist and composer, and he has several projects that are kind of big and encompassing.
Okay.
I forget all the names of them, but yeah. But anyway, look him up, Josh Nelson, if you don't know him
Yeah.
already. He's a beautiful, beautiful musician, and yeah, one has to do with space, and one has to do with Los Angeles history, and
Cool.
they're really beautiful projects.
Yeah.
And yeah, he incorporates various backgrounds too. Are you thinking of a video background or live?
No, I mean, I was thinking of a video background, maybe, but really, really what I want to do is just have it would need to be pretty rehearsed though. So it would have to have, the electronics, because it's very specific where things come in and come out. It's one thing, like it's like my last album, although those were shorter songs, so you can handle that, in 8 minutes or something. But to do like huge project like this, it's like a theater project in a way, where everything has to be rehearsed and stuff. So it's ambitious. It also would take more money, and so these are the things that I need to think about. But I just need to sort of finish it for now, because I do have part of a recording grant already, and I'd like to try to publish it as a book, the poem with CD kind of thing. And so I can't really know what is possible until I can sort of start pitching the thing a bit more, and just
Yeah.
sort of like see where the energy is. Because I guess the one of the positive things about doing a new project like this that is just kind of experimental and stuff is that when people get interested in it, they can get quite excited about it, because it's not like other things they've done.
Yeah.
Like there's really even Jonathan Goldsmith is, he says he's done a lot of interesting things, and he's played so many different kinds of music. He's a brilliant musician, great pianist, on top of being a really strong composer. You know, these guys, they want to do things that are creative to them and interesting, and there's humor in this project, a lot of dark humor. There's like playing with expectation, of course, because already it's just kind of a bit strange in terms of the subject matter. And then even like there's a lot of room for humor, so it's funny. There's a lot of dark humor in it, and it just has to find
This
the
is
right.
sounding a little like Pulp Fiction.
It probably is. Well, she needs jazz or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, there's some dark humor about it. There's a lot of that. But it's not violent. There's no violence in it, so it's not like it's not a Tarantino project.
But I love that. I think a lot of people love that mixture of emotion and quality, you know.
Yeah.
I really do. I think that's very, and maybe it's current, the current times, but I think a lot of people like that. They're drawn to the differences and the humor and the darkness. It kind of has touches on everything.
People like, I think, to have to be on the edge of their seats. You know, I mean, this again, I'm bringing this back to like this is like a movie that has no visuals. It's kind of where it's coming from in a certain sense. I mean, the poetry that I write is very image based anyway. The
Uh-huh.
style that I'm into and just inspired by different movements that are, you know, rely on imagery in the poetry and the metaphors and stuff. So they're just describing, you know, like almost like images poetry or some stuff from the modernist movement. There's postmodernist stuff going on with language too, but the sense that you don't have to just you don't have to go into stuff if you describe a scene, and the beauty of poetry is you don't have to paint it if it's weird. You know, you can just describe it and people can sort of experience that. And then if you color that with music, it can become pretty colorful, and people even have described the music that I write as highly visual, if you can imagine. So being at the edge of your seat, having expectation, trying to understand, all of a sudden you're in a new place, all of a sudden where are you, all of a sudden it's like this kind of like, you know, T.S. Eliot, I can't remember who said it, but he described something that like as his style of writing The Wasteland is like a jump cut cinematic technique, which is like 1 minute you're here, then a minute you're there, and stuff like that. And so this is the kind of stuff that you can afford in poetry because you don't have to paint a million paintings, and I'm not a painter anyway. So it gives you I find a certain freedom of expression, and this way I can focus more on what I'm trying to get people to experience. So these emotional roller coasters where 1 minute you are experiencing something that is kind of scary or disturbing, and then another minute there's this weird dark humor thing that just showed up, and then all of a sudden there's like some improvising going on, and you're like, wow, this is really strange. And then all of a sudden it's like the end of the scene. So this is what I'm doing. Yeah.
Could you share some poetry? I mean, either say it or
Yeah.
show us or something. It would be great.
Well, I could read something. Um, you mean from the new piece or just the style that I'm talking about?
Anything you would like. Yeah. In fact, one of the listeners just asked that. He said, "Can we hear some of Lara's creations?" So I guess everybody wants to hear a little something.
Yeah, well, you know, we could listen to something from my last album, or I could, you know, read I printed all the poetry with
I'd
it.
love to hear you read, and also we can listen, but I'd love to
Okay,
hear you read. Yeah.
okay. So, let me think.
Okay.
Let me just think about what I would read here. Um, I'll read something that you'll play. So the question is, would you be interested in playing a ballad? Would you be interested in playing something that it sounds, we could do the opening tune. Actually, that's the last song I wrote, and it's the most influenced by Debussy and the Cinq Poèmes de Baudelaire, but it's also about the Christopher Park in New York
Uh-huh.
City. And it is 8 minutes and 33 seconds, and it's called Bittersweet Christopher Street.
Okay. So, am I listening to you read, or am I listening to the music or the recording? What am I doing?
Shall I read the poem and then we could pull it up either?
Yeah.
We could pull it. Well, I have the video. I mean, I made my own video for this, so. But we could also pull the music off of um, just the internet, or I'll also. It depends, you know, what like format you want it in.
I can do any format really. So,
Okay.
yeah, whatever works is fine with me.
Do you want me to send you the MP3 or wave track, or do you want to open it up
Sure.
on? It's also on Bandcamp. If you like to
Okay.
upload it
I
to
could go to
Bandcamp.
Bandcamp too.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So this is Bittersweet Christopher Street, and here's the musicians. I'll mention them at the end before you play it, just because people won't remember.
Okay.
Okay. Bittersweet Christopher Street. There are two Christophers stationed here this summer. Two cities and two hands confined thereon in a quandary. 5 roads intersect, dank weather, steel leather marred park bench. A birch ascends, sealed shadows heap. O Christophers, poised in belfry towers, you circumscribe crude vine. Sedgy parquet, your garden locks, another, wipes fact from abyss wedged mouth. Saint Christopher, protean suffix, Saint Christopher, 5-pronged prickly star. Kitty flash frozen fair, how naive you are. Saint Christopher, sandpaper tongue. Saint Christopher, protean suffix, Saint Christopher, 5-stop shifting bar. Kitty glass, bezel set, how naive you are. Saint Christopher, sandpaper tongue. The birch peels panther, the branches split reach, the frames they keep, Christopher Street. There are two Christophers stationed here this summer, two cities, two strewn hands. Past and present turnstiles whisk fricative. Rainwater and a broom flush seared ardor. A rose's indolent injection through the Gothic holes of a cast iron fence. A music seeps from either end of Christopher Street. So that's about the Christopher Park, you know, the kind of the Gothic environment that it is, and the beautiful park that they have that has all these kind of, it's like it's basically like a gated garden, you know, and the sense of, you know, the roses, and it's the height of summer. New York in the summer is really hot and humid. Almost kind of like a tropical urban insane jungle. And so the notion of the, you know, the flowers and the thorns and everything are just kind of like coming out. It's a bit scary. It's a bit Edgar Allan Poe, who inspired Baudelaire, and the sense of things being on the edge somehow. They're, you know, the summer, the height of the summer, there's kind of like these insinuations of pain, and, you know, this is sort of a weird scenario that's being set up. So here's the personnel on the tune. So music and poetry by myself, Lara Solnicki. Myself on vocals, Peter Lutek on alto saxophone, Jonathan Goldsmith, who's the producer, and he's the pianist. Rob Pilch plays electro and acoustic guitar. Scott Peterson plays electric bass. And Davide Di Renzo plays the drums. And it was recorded in Toronto at Desert Fish Studio.
And this, the name of this song, I'm on Bandcamp, but which?
It's the opening tune from the one and the other. It's called Bittersweet Christopher Street.
Bit her sweet Christopher Street, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are two Christophers stationed here this Seal shadows here. Oh, Christopher's poised in belfry towers. You circumscribe crude wine. Sedgy bucket, your garden walls, another wife's fact from abyss, wedged mouth, Saint Christopher, Protean suffix, Saint Christopher, five-pronged prickly star. Giddy flash, frozen fair, how naive you are. Saint Christopher, sandpaper tar. The branches split reed, the frames they keep, Christopher Street. Saint Christopher, Protean suffix, Saint Christopher, five-stop shifting bar, kitty glass bezel set, how naive you are. Saint Christopher, sandpaper tar.
Nice.
Thank you.
Can't wait to hear the rest.
Yeah, that's the
Um,
opening tune.
yeah, really very nice, beautiful.
Thank you.
Um, can you play Whose Shadow? Whose Shadow? Um, shall I? Somebody's asking, can I play something from Whose Shadow?
Sure, yeah. This what you played I'll Remember April. That was from Whose Shadow.
Uh-huh.
The last song on the album. I can talk a bit about this album. It's my second album. So it was kind of an album where I wanted to do a bunch of things, put them together in a way that I thought would also help my development moving ahead while making doing things that interested me and looking for common themes among music that is a combination of straight ahead, jazz tunes like the Peacocks, I'll Remember April, a couple of original songs that I guess are kind of modern jazz, loosely to speak. A couple of jazz arrangements of classical songs. There's a Ravel piece and a Purcell Baroque tune. That and then there was, a Joni Mitchell tune, a Peter Gabriel tune, and a Kate Bush tune. So, art pop music. So it was a hard record to sing. Oh yeah, and there's a Diane Reeves song too. It was a hard record to sing. It's really, really rangy. Obviously, there's a lot of different styles, despite the fact that the arrangements, they could all bring in the commonality factor. I put things in extreme keys just for the colors because I wanted to. So some of it is pretty low. Some of it is has a few high notes, Um, and the songs were kept at around 5 minutes apiece in order to make it more, radio friendly. Because I figured, I didn't want to do anything too weird at the beginning of my career because I didn't know if that, like everyone will give you different advice how to build a fan base, right? Like it's like if you listen to everyone, you'll become just very vanilla because you can't please everyone. So, but I figured, okay, well, not doing something weird up front is too early is probably a good idea. So this record was challenging, but I sort of, in a way, I felt that it had enough to please different people along with myself, right? And then it was a growing process, of course, because I don't, unless you're on tour with a band and then you have the option, the luxury where you know the repertoire so well that you just go into the studio and do like a jazz record in a day or two, and it's not that expensive. This record wasn't going to be like that. So it was a lot of like meeting musicians in the recording studio or just before, which has its challenges. So that's a long answer, but whatever somebody wants to hear, like it depends what they want. If they want to hear Baroque music done with kind of like in a jazz voice with the odd nod to classical voice, we could do music for a while, which is a
I
fun.
It would be really great. I mean, we have time still, but it would be great to kind of have a little bit of one and then see a little
Yeah,
bit of one. Would you mind if I did that?
absolutely. I think the Peacocks might be a great choice. That's probably my favorite song from that album. Just
Okay.
because I used to do that a lot with gigs, like all these gigs I'm telling you about, like duo gigs with guitar. Ted Quinlan plays guitar on this album, and we used to perform together a lot. And we used to do the song a lot, so it has a special place in my heart. And of course, it's just such a great song. So, Jimmy Rawls,
Okay.
Norma Winston. So
Yeah.
that'd probably be a good choice.
All right. And Anthony wants to know, what places in New York are you hoping to perform at?
Well, I'm not pursuing any gigs in New York right now because I'm trying to finish this project, and then this project will not be something to try to get a gig at, um, like in the village at some. It's going to have to be somewhere that is open to doing these multimedia things, and then I have to figure out what the budget is, and then it's one of those situations where, again, you're talking about no nets and stuff. If I bring in a huge project like this, then there has to be enough funding, and then or I have to be realistic about how spared down it can get and still keep the integrity of the piece. So there's a lot of stuff to consider. Like I found that with my last album, because there's also a lot of electronics and stuff, and only some of it could be performed, in a duo or trio situation. And a lot of venues these days, they want to know like the size of your band, and the smaller it is can be the bigger selling point. So I just have to really finish this project right now. I'm not looking for gigs right at this moment. Like I'm teaching, and I'm just sort of trying to get this thing done, and then sort of go from there.
Okay.
Good question. It totally depends. Like, I mean, if I wind up finishing a bunch of more like vocal instrumental type stuff, then maybe I can try to get a trio gig and try to promote that at a more mainstream jazz venue. But this project that I'm writing right now is not for that. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't have a better answer.
That's okay. Okay, we're gonna take a test, like what is it called, a flight. We're gonna have a little bit of different things. I'll try and be tasteful about it. Okay, so here we go. Okay, let's see. We're gonna start with A Timeless Place.
Yeah.
This is a great record to have, guys.
The windows looked out into a pattern never ending of flowers and trees and little pathways far descending to the garden far below us, the pavilions in the sunlight, where the peacocks proudly graze the scene. A vision, timeless place, another way of living. You moved in so close, I really thought that you were giving. I allowed myself a moment to believe that you could need me, to reflect upon what might have been. The summer sky I saw reflected in the color of your eyes, but somehow I could never peel away the layers of disguise. I'm drowning now, slowly sinking in a sea of blue and green, where what you are is never seen. How can anybody know you?
Gorgeous. I'm gonna go La Flûte Enchantée.
en sa barbe blanche. Mais moi, je suis éveillée encore et j'écoute en dehors une chanson de flûte épanche de retour la tristesse ou la joie.
I'm sorry. I apologize for jumping around. It's fun to jump around, though. This is a really, little taste of everything.
Looking down on empty streets, all she can see are the dreams all made solid, are the dreams made real. All of the buildings, all of those cars were once just a dream in somebody's head. She pictures the broken glass, pictures the steam. She pictures a soul with no leak at the seam. Let's take the boat out, wait until darkness. Let's take the boat out, wait until darkness comes. Nowhere in the corridors of pale green and gray, nowhere in the suburbs in the cold light of day. There in the midst of it, so alive and alone, words support like bone, dreaming of Mercy Street, where you're inside out, dreaming of mercy in your daddy's arms again.
Wow, beautiful. It's one of my favorite songs.
Diane Reeves. She co-wrote it.
Diane Reeves?
Yeah, she co-wrote it with a couple of other people.
Okay.
Follow the sunset, follow the dreams that curve around you. Wade in the waters, bathed in the ancient light that found you, yeah. From the breath of pure creation comes joy that sets my spirit free. In rapture of surrendering, I'm one with all that lives.
I can hear her singing it. She's very distinct, in her singing and writing, isn't she?
Yeah, that's probably, I guess, the most poppy tune on the album.
Oh, okay.
Joni Mitchell too. I mean, we did them to a click track too, right? So it's kind of a different approach.
Yeah. Um, so, first of all, I just want to say hi to some people who came on. Hi, Nolan. Hi, Beverly, Joyce. Joyce, this is Lara Solnicki from Canada. And she's a singer, composer, poet, and very interesting projects she's involved with. Her newest one, you kind of missed it. You should go back and listen to the beginning of this interview. Very, very, very interesting project she's working on. Um, okay, now that I've said all that, I know. And let's see. Yeah, so that's a really beautiful project, a beautiful mix of material, and the instrumentation is really beautiful. You sound
Yeah.
beautiful.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, and yeah, it's a beautiful. Did you say that was your first record?
No, my first record is I don't know why it doesn't seem like it's online right now, but it's all standards and
Oh,
mostly ballads. It's called A Meadow in December after
okay.
Midnight Sun, the line in Midnight Sun. So that's, I mean, I don't have any more hard copies, but people aren't necessarily asking for hard copies anymore.
Yeah,
I don't
so
know.
going back to the beginning of our conversation.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that was my first album was, all standards
Yeah,
and mostly ballads.
okay. Yeah. Yeah, this I watched a little bit of one of your interviews. I don't remember which one, but you said something like did you say I'm an inside person? Is that what you said?
No, I guess I was describing myself as an introvert or
Yeah,
something. I'm
yeah,
a
I got that. No, I got that, but listening to your stuff and listening to what you're doing, I can understand why you're saying that. There's a lot of um well, whatever. I mean, I don't want to put words on it, but thinking, observing, you know,
yeah,
uh, creating, and work. There's a lot of self work in your projects. It's very obvious, and I think it leaves a really good effect.
thank you.
Yeah, I think yeah, I mean, this is me, but I think this effect is needed,
Hmm.
and I think it's desired more and more, this effect. And so I think it's really quite worthy because it's um, I mean, of course, there are those people who are saying, how many copies are you selling? What's your audience? Blah, 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 blah. But that's not really why we're doing this, right? I mean,
No.
some people are, but you know, I think um, when you have sincere artists, that's
Hmm.
not what they're doing. They're doing it
Yeah.
for other needs and reasons and feelings and expressions. So I think
Yeah.
that's my take on your stuff. It's
Well,
very nice.
it's definitely getting more and more personal
Yeah.
it's becoming more and more me. I'm integrating more aspects of myself and my demons and my personal work. So you're observing all that. Um, what I find what bothers me that happens with the jazz label for female vocalists in particular is that more and more it does feel like it's getting because it's like a reaction to the fact that it's getting harder and harder to sell records, to perform for a living. So people are getting more and more scared, and then they're targeting a lot of the time what they're doing more and more for the mass public. So it often becomes more entertaining and a bit kind of like cautious and safe, right? And I find that too bad, because I think that art is never really been about, it's, yeah, of course there's an escapist film. Some people want to feel good when they, go out and stuff like that. But I feel that, if it like there's further to go. And I think that if people, there's a lot of power, like with the internet and the power of convincing people and good promotion. So I think that anything pretty much can be promoted, and if people decide to make it trendy, to do, more of these emotions. Like if you look at the jazz singers, Billie Holiday and these people from the past, they didn't quite have that responsibility to make people feel good in the same way as people seem to think now. So I would like, I'm not trying to make people feel bad, but like there's the dark humor and the sort of the abnormal psychology thing that I'm doing, because I just see a lot of it in the world. So it makes, why wouldn't I write about it? Whether or not it belongs in jazz, or even maybe some people won't think it's a jazz record with the recited poetry. It just has there's jazz in it, because anytime there's improvising and people are trained in jazz, it just becomes part of your language. So yeah, as an artist, I hope that I'm moving more and more in a direction that's more personal. And I hope that that would benefit me in terms of finding the right audiences and people who are excited about projects and feel that it actually makes them feel that they can relate to something in a different way, rather than what is she like? Well, this person and that person, and there's a comparison. I would like to just do something that's just different. I mean, I remember this last album, even when Davide Di Renzo told his wife that he was because he's done so many kinds of music and pop music and all kinds of just great jazz musician and stuff. And went home from the studio, and his wife said, "What's the album? What's the music like?" And he said, "It's like nothing you've ever heard before." And I was like, great, let's go with that, I'm
Yeah,
happy with that label.
yeah,
That's a non-label label, I guess.
yeah. Labels. Well, I mean, one of the first, Tom Waits couldn't get even a record label interested in him in the beginning, and then later people would, when they went into the record labels, they'd say, "Can't you be more like Tom Waits?"
Right.
Eva Cassidy. Eva Cassidy was great in so
Yeah.
many different ways, and they had no idea what to do with her, so she got lost in the shuffle. And although she still has a following, which is
Yeah.
interesting, but
Phyllis
yeah,
Hyman was another one too. She was such a great singer, but her repertoire ended up being kind of like wishy-washy. She got put in the hands of, people who tried to fit her into a mold, but then she was such a great singer, right? She didn't become as famous as she should have. And then,
yeah. There's been, yeah, I mean, that's always happening, and it's hard to, but
yeah,
I think now, not speaking of financial rewards, but I think more artists
yeah,
are um, are moving into this direction, doing what they feel, doing what they want, and and then getting the audience because of what they're doing,
yeah,
and that's it. And marketing is always, uh, if I mean, marketing has always been, it's necessary, but it's like an endless, it's an
yeah,
endless motion, and
yeah,
there's always something new. And I mean, it's cool to hire people to do it for
yeah,
you, but you have to do some yourself. I
for
mean,
sure.
marketing is just, huge. But yeah, but this direction, I think I see it all over the place, right? Don't you? People doing what they want to do.
I think a lot of jazz singers are getting poppier and poppier, and when the music they're writing is even sounding pretty poppy, like it has the sort of formulaic pop patterns, but then, in a way, it's not like it doesn't make sense to me because a lot of jazz singers came up singing with pop tunes, singing along with records, singing, and so if you didn't come up through the stream of classical music, you probably came up through the environment of pop. So that, like, the same way I start writing like art songs that are poetry based, because that's my upbringing musically. I came from a classical background. So people have this nostalgia for their, formative period. And so people are, there's a lot of people that end up going into more the poppy direction. I mean, sometimes it works really well. I mean, I like some pop music too, obviously. And, people do a lot of Joni Mitchell covers because her music, she's a great artist and her stuff lends itself well to jazz arrangements and what, and then of course Ravel too and Debussy because of the chords, and it obviously translates well into jazz. But a lot of people are, doing sort of more poppier stuff, and that's cool. It's just like I would never write a popish sounding tune because it just doesn't, it's not really me. I don't come from that background.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I see that all the time in friends. I see it in
Yeah.
students. I see it in myself. You know, I'm a child of the 70s, basically. So that was a real vital time for music. And I was in Boston and at
Yeah.
Berkeley. And so, yeah, that was like, there was Motown, there was
Yeah.
ECM
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
kind of beginning. And I
Yeah.
mean, even Blood, Sweat, and Tears. That was kind of a shift in in music, and Flora Purim.
Oh
That
yeah.
was a major shift. So all of
Yeah.
that is in me. I mean, and I just write what I write. Sometimes it's very what I call folky. Sometimes people have wanted to. They say, "Oh, that song should be in a show." I don't hear
Hmm.
that, but they do, then jazz and blah blah blah. So anyway, but yeah, it's uh, speaking of jazz singers. Well, who's one or two of your jazz singers that you like?
Well,
It doesn't what from whatever period.
I love Flora Purim actually. That's someone that I often will gravitate towards, especially these days. I love her singing and I love her music and she's amazing. And I do like a lot of those improvisers that kind of, obviously I also love Norma Winston and,
Me
you
too.
know, her early stuff is really fantastic. I mean, she has a relationship with Toronto. She would come up here and give concerts and do master classes and stuff. I don't know when she was here last, but I've seen her live here twice, once with Fred Hirsch.
We recorded together.
No way.
Yeah, there was a song I recorded in England, and
Mhm.
Uh, I knew her through another friend and, visited her and stuff. She's really sweet. And but there was a song that I thought it would be really good to have her on. It was a John Abercrombie song that I wrote lyrics to and
Yeah.
called Hippolytville. And interestingly enough, when I contacted her and I said, you want to come sing this with me? She said, "You are kidding," because she had had a gig across the hall from Abercrombie and he played that song every night and she loved it. And it's
Yeah.
amazing that she didn't write lyrics to it, because she's
No
so
kidding.
prolific.
Yeah.
And anyway, I'll send you that. It was really cool. And she and I,
Yeah.
our tone qualities in that song were very similar, and we were
Mhm.
scatting together, and it was really cool. So yeah, I think she's an outstanding, beautiful singer. She's just got
Yeah.
that quality that I love in jazz singers. That's fluid,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're really there, but fluid, lots of space and
Yeah,
um,
I love that spaciousness. I'm a big fan of that. I mean, another singer that I really admire is Dominique Eade, who you probably know her personally.
yes, yeah.
She's brilliant. I took a lesson with her, and one with Ran, and I actually with Ran Blake, and I actually have a grant to work with them, but I was supposed to go over for I guess 2 months in the summer during the pandemics, and that kind of ended up obviously being put on hold and stuff. But I would love to go over and work with her for an extended, maybe just like 3 weeks, a couple times a week, or do something. I mean, she's so phenomenal. I have a lot of her albums. I really admire her. She can do so many different styles, and I've heard her even scat really quickly. Like she's just, Luciana Souza is another, studied with her, obviously. She's another great
She's in LA. Yeah.
improviser. Great
Yes.
improviser, great musician.
She is great. Yeah. One
Yeah.
time, I think my favorite time I saw her, we had a club called the Blue Whale, which was an amazing, amazing club for 10
Did
years.
it close?
It did during the pandemic.
Oh,
Yeah. So she was at the Blue Whale with Larry Kuntz on guitar and David Pilch on bass, both like incredible. And she was also playing like cocktail drums. I, I don't know
oh
if she
yeah.
would call that cocktail drums, but that was what she was playing. And the place was absolutely packed to the brim. It's a relatively small room, but it held maybe 200 people or something.
Okay.
And it was just like we're talking about with Dominic and
Yeah.
Norma. It was one of those nights. It was so free but present, and
Yeah.
it was just gorgeous. It was probably one of my favorite concerts I ever saw.
Wow. Well, David Pilch is the brother of Rob Pilch. So I was just talking about that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
He's a friend
Um,
of mine. He's a
nice.
great guy and wonderful player.
Yeah, yeah. They came from a really musical family, and their father, Bernie Pilch, was, I guess, he played saxophone and a bunch of different.
That's funny because I heard you say the name Pilch and I was like, oh, and I should have known because I knew they were they were from Canada. Wow. No, my friend Joyce said something here. I think this is maybe an interesting little subject to talk about. She said a lot of jazz singers, sorry, hold on.
Sure.
A lot of jazz singers seem compelled to alter and play with melodies of jazz standards beyond the integrity of the melodies to try and make a statement and be noticed and stand out in the crowd. They don't want to sing the melodies as written, straight and with the beauty of simplicity and subtle storytelling as it's understated in confident motivation. I think that's an interesting subject to talk about. How do you feel about that?
Well, I guess, the art of paraphrasing, right? To just so, ideally you would, sing the head with the intentionality of the composer. Um, and then if you want to embellish it which is a thing to do, in the paraphrasing, some people paraphrase really well and they don't scat improvise at all. They just improvise through the use of, I would say that, yeah, some people are really good at it. I guess some people maybe wouldn't like Betty Carter then, based on what this individual said. I mean, that's cool. I guess, I don't know. I think it's like a case by case basis. I think that it doesn't work when people embellish a melody without being aware of the text. And that is true with instrumentalists too. You see people who are learning these tunes kind of more mechanically, but sometimes they turn a ballad into an upswing tune, and it just doesn't make sense
Yeah.
thematically what the song's about, unless you're making a statement, as sort of like adding another emotional layer, like a
Yeah.
not sarcastic, but like people do My Favorite Things or something, and there's kind of a sadness to that, but you can hear it sort of a happy and sad interpretation at the same time, and that can have a lot of depth. And be very beautiful. So it really depends on, but when people embellish the wrong words, that's another one too, so that
Yeah.
you want to bring out the story with your embellishments and not use the embellishments to just show off your technique or to kind of like change the point. I would say that's just not a very successful interpretation, probably.
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree with you. And
Yeah.
I saw a good example of a song is "The More I See You." So, a lot of people swing that song. And it's
Yeah.
okay. It swung. However, as a ballad, and it was written as a ballad. So that's an example of a song. And then, but I agree, it's a case by case
Yeah.
situation because some people are so good at what I think. I mean, I have I like to allow people their own space and
Mhm.
creation. If they're the biggest thing that I care about is truth.
Yeah.
So if somebody's singing really stick straight, but they totally believe it, I'm okay with that. I don't have to force my students into stretching because, you know, it's not as jazzy as they could be. So that's my first desire. And on the other side of it, I've heard like this one up and coming singer who rearranged this standard totally. And it's not that I'm opposed to rearranging,
Hmm.
but there was something about it that didn't ring true. It was it was more for show or something. I'm not really sure what I didn't like about it. It was brilliant. The musicians were great, great singer, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't like it. So I think it is case by case. But for
Totally.
me, it's more about the truth. If you sing it with all your truth, I'm probably gonna be okay with it. And in any style too.
And some of this music just needs a lot of life experience. Like if I hear someone who's coming up and they have a stylistic thing that they're nicely and even good technique, a good voice, and they perform Lush Life or Sophisticated Lady, and you can see like they just haven't been there in their personal journey,
Yeah,
or they came from an environment that's just it feels like a bit of a costume. And I can't listen to that. Like I'll turn it off.
yeah,
I'd much rather hear someone who's really lived the life, and even if they're singing with, a vocal phrase here and there, and but there's something of interest and it's a compelling performance, then somebody who's just, like some people are kind of really imitating the old style singers in terms of their style, but it feels a bit weird because it does, again, it's like they're trying it on.
yeah,
I actually like singers mostly that don't have a lot of isms in what they do. They just sing with a nice, good technique and a clarity with the pitch and great phrasing, and then they color the words and stuff like that. That's already a lot, I mean, they used to teach us that in classical singing school, not to do a lot of stuff that, if you can just be true to the composers and still draw in the listener and do it with a beautiful tone and do all the diminuendos and all the stuff that's hard to do and not blast your voice on the top just because it's getting high, and use all the stuff that's already intended in the music, then and pull it off well, then that's a lot.
well, that brings to mind Cecile McLaurin Salvant. That's what I
Uh-huh.
think she does. She's very versatile and very truthful, and
Yeah.
I even like the fact that how she dresses. She does not dress like sex dress at
Mhm,
all.
mhm, mhm.
And but her tone, uh, her latest record, her French record, I was fascinated with because A lot of times I listen to other language records, especially French, and because I don't speak French, I'm I may think it's beautiful, but moving me, emotionally, kind of gets by me. But when I listen to her French record, I'm moved. She has a lot of emotion in the words, and it's kind of fascinating to me.
She has a Haitian background, is
Yeah,
she?
I think half, possibly half Haitian.
Did she grow up in France? Because I think, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah, I
she
think
wanted
so.
to sing classical music, like French Baroque music or something like that.
I think she did. Yeah,
Yeah. So she might be more comfortable expressing herself, or not more comfortable, but super comfortable anyway,
yeah,
expressing herself in French. And, you know,
yeah.
I went
She's
through French immersion, so I grew up, speaking French in school. So that's a language I'm pretty comfortable in too. I mean, I go in and out of being fluent in it. I would have to be somewhere for a few days to feel completely at ease,
yeah,
but I feel pretty comfortable in the language and the culture and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've been to Japan so many times, every time I try and speak a language with somebody, I revert back to Japanese. And it's
Yeah.
not that I'm fluent, it's just what I know is in my mouth. But it's like, oh, sorry.
How's the jazz singing business going these days in Japan? Is there, like, since the pandemic and stuff, things are going strong?
They've uh, they were very tight in the beginning, and of course, because space is very small there, like, yeah, I
Mm.
mean, if you teach somebody, you're in a small room, and a lot of the clubs are small. They're like a small apartment.
Oh my gosh, how many people can fit in, let alone a
I
band?
don't know, maybe, let's see. I'm thinking of this one place. Unbelievable. You walk in the door, everything's very tight. Only one or two people can walk in a little tiny passageway where the bathroom, is behind a door. Then there's the bar, which holds maybe six people. And then it's like a little L. And then in the L, there's the piano, the grand piano. And on one side is seating for four. And on this side, there's maybe seating for four. I mean, that's probably one of the smallest clubs I've ever sung in there, but still,
Wow.
they have a lot of small clubs. So in the pandemic, you're not going to get a lot of people in places like that. However, so I usually go once a year, but I haven't been since 2019 because I was
Right.
going to go in 2020 in March.
Mm.
And so actually this May I'm going back for the first time in a few years. And so uh, clubs seem to be open up. Students are interested. So I think I think they're, running back. But I'm sure like I'm sure like everything, um, um, clubs closed, I'm sure. But Japan is really interesting with art. I think your project, even
Mhm.
though the language is quite um, English oriented, I don't
Yeah.
know if a lot of people would understand the words, but um, I think the art community in Japan would be drawn to what you're doing. There's the kind of the regular old community, and
Yeah.
people are very into the old standards and
Oh,
that
yeah.
genre. But artists are very um, serious and community oriented, you know. So I don't know. I love Japan. It's like another planet. It's you
I
know
bet.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
I was on a compilation there. I think it was actually Mercy Street that they used, but I don't know how they just found me, and then continue, they used to buy a bunch of my CDs and I would ship them there. And I still get royalty checks twice a year from that
Oh,
compilation
yay.
from like 10 years ago. They're not big, but for a while they actually weren't bad considering there were, 10 people on the record. I was getting an amount that would surprise me. Um, but yeah, I do have that sense that, they like vocalists and that, certainly I knew people who would go over and do a bunch of gigs and do some teaching and make some money, and it was a positive
Yeah.
they'd be exhausted because of the time change, but it was pretty fun, it's exciting. So
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know that I would go to Australia anymore because it's really far and it's not
yeah.
that different. I mean, it's nice, but you know, I don't know.
Are you teaching at any of the universities there, or you run your own private studio
Now,
practice?
now I run my own private. I've taught at Cal State LA and
Oh,
also MI in the old days, which broke apart and one part became LACM in Pasadena. And so
yeah.
I've taught at those three. I've taught at what's that? The college, the university in
California Jazz Conservatory. You must have done
no,
some stuff at
I've
North Antonioli, right?
I know
Yeah.
Laurie, yeah, but
Okay.
I've taught at Occidental, Occidental, which
Okay.
is a very good school, but they weren't really into jazz vocal. They didn't quite get it. I mean, they had me for a few semesters and then they were like, eh.
What were
So
they teaching? Like a pop
they
structure?
were, well, no, they weren't teaching vocal. Although they might have been teaching classical, but I don't remember knowing about that. They had instrument classes, but and there were some kind of vocal. It must have been classical, I would assume, but I can't quite remember. But anyway, that was Occidental. But Cal State LA, I taught there for 7 years. I just got tired of the university red tape, and
Yeah.
I'm not a good red tape person. I don't follow that line real well.
Yeah.
So I I teach privately, and I'm big on workshops. Although since the pandemic, my workshop creation kind of calmed down some, and
Yeah.
I host people when they come into town. I create workshops for them and usually
Oh,
gigs, and I've had hundreds and hundreds of workshops, and
hmm.
um, it's fun. I like doing workshops, and I like private teaching, of course, but yeah, that's mostly what I do. And then when I travel, I do that too, workshops and private teaching as well, as performing.
Where did you grow up in the US?
Boston,
Oh, you grew up in Boston. That's
yeah,
great. Were
yeah.
your parents involved in teaching in the university system there?
No, my mother was not, but my mother had been a singer, and my dad was a sax player and
Yeah.
band leader. Um, and then I had two twin sisters who were 4 years older than me. One played piano, and they both sang great. And
Mm.
so we grew up, you know, as a vocal group.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. Yeah, and it was always jazz was always a part of it because my dad was into jazz, and but of course, like I said, I'm a child of the 70s, and so all that music was happening. I mean, that was a real
Oh, yeah.
vital time, for music, for pop music.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the pop music that you grew up again, around. There's really I can't think of. Yeah, I mean, it was all happening.
It was a good time.
I bet it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think what you were just going to say, like the 80s, okay, well, the 80s were not my favorite music time.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I grew up in the 70s with that stuff.
Mm.
60s, 70s, somewhere around there. I'm glad.
Yeah.
That was good.
Are you a fan of Laura Nero? When you talked about the
Definitely.
musician background, family and stuff, and I was, your sort of the stuff you grew up around. Yeah, she's incredible. I
I
cannot.
do. Are you familiar with that Billy Child's project of Laura Nero's music?
It was like an LA project,
Gorgeous.
isn't it? It's beautiful. Yeah,
Gorgeous
gorgeous
with great
arrangement,
singer, all these great singers, and yeah, yeah.
wonderful arrangements. I like Gibson Street is a
Ah,
gorgeous arrangement.
and
Oh
I
yeah.
think I think my favorite one is the one that Ricky Lee Jones sings, "Been on a Train." That's the
Oh
jazziest one. But she's like, "Been on a train." She has that really different voice, and it's all about a guy shooting up or whatever. But it's like,
yeah.
oh God, that is a great cut. I just love that cut.
Wonderful arrangements. Did it win a Grammy actually?
I think it did.
Yeah.
He won a Grammy recently. He's a very wonderful player and great mind and
Really
arranger.
child.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
really he played at the Blue Whale a bunch actually with that project,
Oh,
and it was cool. Are you aware of Moira Smiley? You should check her out. She's a really interesting singer with a real interesting history. I mean, really unusual. She went to
hmm.
Russia and studied Russian singing, and
Oh,
she's kind of a folky person, extremely creative.
hmm.
Um, she she does these too. She does like let's see, how do I call it? Like she has this wonderful video. Um, I'm trying to think of the name of it. Something Bring the Water. It's kind of a folky thing, but it's with five or six women a cappella singing and doing doing the
Yeah, yeah,
body
body percussion.
percussion. Yeah, and it's really great. I mean, I think you'd really like her. She's really
Okay.
interesting. Moira Smiley. Yeah, I'll write it
Okay.
for you too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very cool. So what are the gigs that singers are doing now in LA? Because I remember, the only place that I was really told about in the downtown part that would have been suited for kind of what I do, it seemed like everyone was performing at the Blue Whale. So now that it doesn't exist anymore, my brother was living in LA for a long time. He's just left recently, but it would have been an excuse to go down and hang out with him and have a performance. And I could stay with my family there too, some other family there. But what are people doing now? Like,
Well, let's see. Um, in my community, there's some professional singers, and just speaking of singers, there's some
mm,
professional singers and kind of some beginnings, not beginning, but more amateur, and then the mid-level singers
yeah,
who
yeah,
can they can perform and sound good. And what they do generally is they pay an arranger to make a project, and then they study the crap out of it, and then they perform, and it's good. It comes off good. But singers, like older singers, professional singers who, you know, they're working again. They're working on projects, maybe record projects, and I think it usually is starts with a record project, and then doing CD release parties or,
right.
um, you know, um, yeah. There's it's kind of a weird
Yes.
mix. It's
I
a
think
weird mix
yeah,
of places. Yeah,
my feeling is that these days, since the pandemic, like those kind of paid gigs, the traditionally like the actual jazz clubs paid gigs are sort of less and less. It's more about like what you're saying. It's about building a new project, promoting that project, renting a venue, trying to, make that money. So it's more like about being, more and more sort of an entrepreneur
yeah.
sort of. So in a way maybe the venues aren't as important, but it's more important to build an audience, and maybe it's the better thing to do now is to try to pull your audience out of different environments. Like I'm going to be going for, you know, the poetry community, who some of them are very interested in seeing what people can do. They love music, but they would be interested in music that has a different treatment of text, that doesn't put it in the background like lyrics. It's because this is like a text poetry driven project, so it becomes different, right? So,
Yeah.
I hope that people are, you know, as just to bring it back to what you're saying earlier, I really do hope that you're right, and that this is a time where people are hungry for something to speak to their souls, something that feels like it's a little less formulaic than some of the, like, just the sort of the built-in expectation of being a jazz singer, where you're being compared to a lot of people and everyone's being compared to each other. I mean, if that was my bag, I would have just stayed in classical music, where you just do like a cattle call for La Boheme, right? I mean, so to be an independent artist, and once you're writing your own stuff and arranging and creating your own teams and stuff, you might as well make something that is personal. And then once you have the project, yeah, just trying to believe that there could be an audience, but then being creative. Like, it's not going to be just maybe you're not going to pull your audience maybe out of like just the traditional, like the jazz radio people, you
Yeah,
know?
it's
Yeah,
interesting. I think having another community like the poetry community, I think
yeah,
that's very promising.
yeah,
And it goes along with marketing discussions I've read about in the past, sell yourself on a cooking show or, I mean, very,
yeah,
things like
yeah.
that. So I think that's pretty cool, although I don't, I don't know, but from what I've heard, I don't think the poetry community has money.
No, I guess that's a profession that makes jazz musicians look like rich people, because there you can always pick up a piano student here or there. There's more money, like there's
Yeah.
yeah, of course. But on the other hand, I feel like the poetry community, I mean, I can speak from Toronto. I can't really speak to the LA people, or the New York would have a bigger group of people, because there'd be like all these professors at all these universities and all their students. And I mean, in a way, it's a bit like the jazz gigs these days. When people do CD release concerts, they're banking on the notion that like half the room or more will be full of their students, right? That's how it is. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people pull audiences out of their students, and stuff like that, or, you know, the fans, people that are passionate, or the academic institutions, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But in poetry, yeah, people are still excited to go to readings, and it's a bit like the jazz. Like, if people are interested in, you know, you do have to hire a publicist, but a lot of it, you have to build relationships on your own, because it's not so huge that you can afford to be just like an enigma behind a screen. You have to, people are interested, and that's good. People want to know about you and stuff like that. I've made some really interesting friends in the industry and everything. People have helped me a lot, my visa and stuff. So, people will buy books though in the poetry community, and I think they would buy CDs, and it's like a kind of grassroots that way. I mean, there's all kinds of different quality level of writers showing up at events, and you know, it's like that with the jazz singing thing too. You just have, like, as you're talking about, there's like a spectrum of like the professionals and the educators, and then there are people that are like serious hobbyists. Some of them do sort of semi-professional things. But, you know, you can still give out postcards with your CD release, and you might get some people from there. And I like that kind of genuine networking, where it just feels more organic, and,
Yeah.
you know, having natural conversations. And I like all that.
Yeah.
That's the type of networking that I'm actually good at. Like,
Uh-huh.
we used to go to the jazz conference all the time in New York, and I would just walk up to musicians that I really liked, and I would be excited to meet them, and it was real and it was great. And I built some, you know, relationships that way. Like, I met Greg Osby that way, and then my second album ended up on his label. And And then, I sort of learned about, just different like nuts and bolts of the industry through meeting other people that are kind of around the same stage that I was in, and all that, and different peers and other people to work with, and gigs that are, approachable, and how people make a living. And so things can happen naturally. I think natural is good, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
Sure.
Just thinking of, you know, being on the road and like I have a project that I'm working on right now, taking it to Norway, and a friend of mine
Ah,
teaches in a school there. And so the project could actually involve the students, and they'd be
yeah.
interested in that. Performances, workshops, you know, so, and then I can get a few gigs, and I'm
But yeah,
guessing probably a few private students. I mean, that was what I did in the beginning, you know, like 20 years ago before the internet was so huge. I would call somebody in Europe, and then I would send a snail mail package, and then I would start calling. I have one gig in Paris or whatever, you know, and then build from there. And I wouldn't, I would more than break even. It wasn't like super expensive, but I would come home with, you know, relatively decent money. I mean, for that, for what, who I was, and these kind of
yeah,
natural connections too, you know.
right.
And so, yeah. Um, but it's hard, you know, I don't know, unless you're really young and you're willing to live funky, you know,
Yeah,
I don't know how much people can really make just performing, you know,
yeah,
on this level, you know.
yeah. And again, I don't know how the pandemic has impacted things too, but it seems like it's always been around the private teaching. I think
Yeah.
for, that's kind of been the way that people try to get a good job teaching at a university, or try to get up a good following of private students, or a combination. And then they come to your gigs like we talked about, and maybe they buy your records, and it just, you're able to have a life in music, and still challenge yourself, and people ideally, want you to keep challenging yourself, and then you meet people in other cities, and you go and you perform there, and maybe you can even stay with people if they have an extra room, rather than couch surfing like what you're talking about in Europe, that like not the most glamorous.
Were
And
you, was your family, uh, you said you were brought up singing classical. And your family, were they musical, and were they classical people, or?
well, no, I mean, I went to classical university, singing university, so that's what I mean by my foundation. Um, I mean, I liked all other kinds of music, but my father was actually a really talented singer. He had a really good voice, untrained, and he could have been a professional opera singer or a jazz singer, because his jazz phrasing was excellent. He would sing, Frank Sinatra type tunes and stuff. He could do all that, but he didn't want to be a professional. And I wouldn't say my parents encouraged me to be in the arts. I mean, my father sort of liked the idea because he was, a film producer, but they didn't help me.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like a self-made person. I mean, they helped me a tiny bit with my undergrad, but I never had the option of going through the American university system, which is a lot better. Like I would have been a dream to do an MA at the New England Conservatory, because that's would have been a perfect fit for me with the way that I am and my different interests, and I could have like put together an awesome team, and Dominique is brilliant, as we've said. So, but I didn't have the money, and there's not enough granting money to cover people like that and stuff. And that's really the way that, like, there is a formula in New York that I realized that people mostly went to these schools in Boston, Berkeley, or the New England Conservatory. Most people I knew, one or the other, Some of them came up through the New York schools, less of them. Some of them, though, right? Like the New School, or a few people went to Juilliard, or obviously
Or
and
Manhattan.
music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But then they would all, like, they had the support from their parents, and then they obviously had some stories, but they would all probably like live in an apartment together and sleep on the floor, but they all were best buddies from going to university together. They rehearsed together, they grew together as artists, they formed bands together, they got
Yeah.
gigs together, then they toured their respective hometowns. So there's like a support system, and then it takes 10 years or whatever in New York to sort of
Yeah.
like start moving a career, usually. Some people less time.
Hmm.
But and so it's very organic, it's like the whole organic uh networking that we're talking about, where people just build relationships. So, and it takes a long time to get to know who you can trust in life in general. So if you're doing things with people for 10 years, yeah, you know them so well, and you go to their weddings and you stay with their families. And so I saw a lot of this in New York. I saw some solid relationships and friendships. I met some really nice people. Um, and they wrote it up, and then they were getting better and better gigs, better and better teaching, and they weren't struggling that much by the time, I was there in 2017 and beyond. So yeah, people come up through these universities. It is a structure and a bit of, and it's kind of the way it usually happens for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Totally.
Well, it's, just about 2 o'clock. Um, and it's been really lovely, a very kind of surprising conversation for me. Um, we started off just the way I like it, not like listing what you've done in your life, but actually just we jumped into what you're doing, which was really interesting to hear about. Um, and yeah, it's been a real pleasure talking with you. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
likewise.
I'm going to keep really attuned in to what you're doing. And I'm sure other people here are going to do that too.
That's wonderful. And I would encourage people to check out my website, although I have to add some recent press, and I've recently changed formats when I moved out of like an old thing with a bunch of Flash. So, and then I've been in between web people. So, things but yeah, as I start moving now to promote this new project, I'm going to start, doing what I always do, which is putting updates on my website, and sending snippets of things on social media, and hopefully I build up a bit of a buzz about this very strange animal of a project that I'm working on. Expect to be frightened, expect to laugh, and expect some, just when you think that it has nothing to do with jazz, and you're gonna get it. 3D music style, like because of the cinematic immersive audio mix we're doing too. So there you have it.
Oh boy. Well, Lara, thank you so much. And thanks for giving us your time. And for those of you listening, I went down to one day. Well, I went down to no days a week. For a while, I was putting up archives. And then now I'm I snuck back into one day a week. So next week, next Monday is Carl Verheyen, who's a really well known jazz guitarist and an old friend of mine. So that's next week. And everybody just have a beautiful week and a beautiful day. And thanks, Lara. Have a nice evening. And
Kathy,
I'll talk to you soon.
sounds wonderful.
Okay.